Hi everyone, it's Chris and welcome back to another video. Thank you very much for joining me. Today I want to talk about the difference between album versions and single versions. And there are some bands, artists and record companies that get it right when they do this, and sometimes they get it wrong. Now, a really classic example of where it doesn't work is something like Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who, which is a great album track. I don't think it was ever a single, but when they made it a single, they edited it down and it just loses the kind of whole feel of the song. Sometimes record companies have to change the track slightly to get it to have some airplay, and so Strangler's Peaches springs to mind, where the expletives were taken out and replaced with other words. But there are sometimes, I think, when single mixes actually are much better and superior to the album version. So a good example, and these are the three that immediately sprung to mind. There's probably loads of others. Please put them down in the comments below. But Dance Away by Roxy Music immediately springs to mind. I think the single mix is far superior to the album version, as is the single mix of Messages by OMD. I think that's vastly superior to the mix that appears on the album. And the other example is when the single mix is done by a completely different producer who changes the sound of it quite profoundly. And a really good example of that for me is The Reflex by Duran Duran. Now, I think the album track, which is about 5.5 minutes long, would never have been the hit it was without Nile Rodgers' intervention and coming up with this kind of almost dance floor kind of song that The Reflex turned out to be. Sometimes, and rarely, but sometimes the single version, surprisingly, is longer than the album version. So I Want to Break Free by Queen immediately springs to mind, as does Talk of the Town by the Pretenders. The single version is actually longer than the album version. And also Outdoor Miner by Wire, that's actually considerably longer, about 35 seconds longer than the album version of it. I think I was guessed it was the record company trying to make what is a really, really good song a little bit more palatable maybe for radio. Now, sometimes I think, though, the single edit is superior to the album version. And so what I've got here is a number of songs that I think in the single edit version are superior to the longer album version. So the first one I'm going to choose is from this album. This is In Deep by Argent. And I don't know if it's the lead off song, I can't remember, is God Gave Rock and Roll to You, which is about 6 minutes plus on the album. But the single clocks in at about 3.5 minutes, and for me is a much, much better song for it. Now, this song was played at my friend Paul's funeral, and typical Paul, he played the album version. He made everyone sit through it. But I think the single version is far superior to the album version. Another example of that comes from this album, The Roaring Silence by Manfred Mann's Earth Band. And the track that opens the album, and I think this is a really tidy album, the track that opens the album is the Bruce Springsteen cover, Blinded by the Light, which was a big hit single for them. And on here, it's probably about 7 minutes long. It has a lovely guitar solo at the end. It's really good. But I think the single version, which is 3 minutes 40, is plenty long enough to get the song over, and I think that's a superior version. It makes it much more into a pop song than the album version. Here's another example. So the Moody Blues. So this is Days of Future Past. Is this their debut? I think it is, isn't it? And there's a song that closes down called The Night. And the first part of that, of course, is Nights in White Satin, which goes on and on and on and on the album into a kind of a classical piece and thing. But, you know, for me, that is a great version of the song. It doesn't need that to follow it. Another good example, and, you know, this will set some purists heart racing. I'm sure I'll get some hate, but hey, it's my video. I can do what I want. But Fanfare for the Common Man, I actually don't have the album Works from which this single is taken, but Fanfare for the Common Man and a single version is plenty long enough for me. The album version just overstays its welcome hugely. Next up is Quo. So this is the album Blue for You from what is this, 1977, I think, 76, this album. One of their last really good albums, I think, and there's a song on here that's a Rick Parfitt song called The Mystery Song, which will be familiar to loads of Quo fans. Great song. It's much longer on the album than the single, because on the album it has this kind of like long introduction, which is just unnecessary. On the single they remove that and they make it much better as a result. Fantastic song. Another really good example is Rare Earth. So this is Rare Earth by Rare Earth, and the song in question is Get Ready. So that was done by The Temptations and was a decent 45. On here, it is a side of vinyl. It's about 20 odd minutes long. Live, it's about 30 minutes long. But on the single, I think it's about 3 minutes or 4 minutes long. That's plenty long enough. It brings it in line with kind of The Temptations and how it was originally perceived. And for me, that's much better. It doesn't need to be some kind of long psychedelic number, for me anyway. Next up is this fella, Stevie Wonder. So he did a few songs that were edited quite a lot for the single. So certainly stuff off Songs in the Key of Life. But this is Inner Visions. I can't remember the year this is in. This is 73, 4. And the song in question is Living for the City. Now, the single, which I think is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant, is highly edited from the album version. I just think the album version goes on too much. I think the single version is a really, really good pop song. So that's certainly when I think the single edit is much better than the album. Now, this one is a single that I bought many years ago, probably around about 1978. I've started to buy singles in sort of 76, 77, 78. And I remember buying this in 1978-ish. I went to a rock disco, which for those people who know kind of the Poole and Bournemouth area of the UK, there was a rock disco that took place at, I think it was Poole Tech, down near the park there. And I remember hearing a song which was turned out was Layla by Derek and the Dominoes, obviously featuring Duane Allman and Eric Clapton, and I loved it. And I went out the following day and I bought the single. And for many years, I thought that was the song. I didn't realise that actually it's a much longer song until I heard this album quite a few years after that. And I thought, what is that stupid piano bit at the end? That just spoils the song. I would be lifting the needle before that bit came on. And I still think the single edit is far superior to the album version. Another example is the title track from this album. So American Pie, Don McLean. This is probably 73, isn't it, as well? 71. It's probably earlier than that, isn't it? 72? I don't know, whenever it is. And the single for me, which is a fairly crude edit. It's got part 1 on the A side and part 2 on the B side, but I think the A side, which is 4 minutes 11, is plenty long enough to get what is an absolutely classic song over. I just think anything more than that is having a laugh. Here's another song that I bought in 78. I love this song. The reason I bought it is because I loved Rocky Mountain Way, and so when Joe Walsh brought out Life's Been Good, I had to buy it, and I've loved it for years. I didn't realise that the album version, until I bought this many years later, is considerably longer. And I think, it's nowhere near as good as that. That's much better. That's a much more concise song. That one just goes on too much. This one is potentially one that I'm not sure about. 4 minutes and 10 of Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. It's over 5 minutes on the album, and it does have, guitar solos and all sorts of stuff. But I think this is an absolutely brilliant pop song, and it has that sax solo, which is just absolutely defining of this particular song. And I think that's long enough. It's a classic song. I don't think it needs to be any longer, but I'm not sure. Jury's out for me on that one. The next up is another song from, again, the 78 time that I didn't realise was actually edited until I bought the album many years later. So the song in question is the title track from Who Are You? From The Who. This is from 1978. And I bought the single in 1978. I love the single, Who Are You? It's brilliant. It's much longer on the album. And I think the single edit is fine. I think it's the best version. Again, Who fans will think that's heresy, but I think that's good enough. And another one that's going to probably get some reaction is in 1974, Kraftwerk brought out Autobahn, which is probably, I don't think it has the time on it. I think it's about 3.5, 4 minutes long. Plenty good enough. It doesn't need to be 22.5 minutes long. It just doesn't. It outstays its welcome on the album. I know there's lots of different parts to it, but the essence of it is definitely in that 3-4 minutes there. And this is another song, again from 78, that I didn't realise was highly edited, but a great AOR song. In fact, one of them, probably their most famous song, alongside Dust in the Wind, Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas. A great song that's much longer on the album version and a little bit proggier, I think, because of the length of it. I much prefer the single version. It's a great song, really catchy, great melody. It doesn't need to go on as it does on the album. Next up is a bit of a comeback album, possibly, or a later album, certainly. I think this is 77, 78, from this band, Sweet, Level Headed. And there's a song on here that was a big single, a kind of, they had a lot of big singles in the 70s, and then a lull, and then suddenly they came back with Love Is Like Oxygen, which is a tremendous song. It's from 78. Now on here it's much longer than the 45. On here it's like, oh, should we write a really proggy kind of song? Yeah, great idea. Don't think it kind of works for you folks, because that is a much better song, I think. So the single version, I'm not sure how long it is. It's probably 3-4 minutes long. The album version considerably longer. That is a much better version of that song. This one is again, not sure about this one. It's from 73. This is Radar Love, the most famous song that Golden Earring obviously ever did. The single version I think is tremendous. It's a brilliant rock song. It is much longer on the album Moontan, much longer, but I think it's certainly good enough on the short version. I do like the longer album version for sure, but I think the single version, plenty good enough. I've got 3 left, and this will send people bonkers, I think, here, because the next up is this fella. Okay, so this is from 1977, Heroes, and the song in question is the title track. Now, I'm not sure how long it is on here, 6 minutes or so. It's considerably shorter on the single, and I think perfectly good enough. It's a great song. It's a brilliant song. I think that version of it is much better than that version of it. I think it outstays its welcome, as I've said a few times about a few of these songs. But Heroes is definitely better as a single for me. The last two are going to potentially piss off some rock fans. Apologies for that, but hey. And it's the most famous song by this band, So Free. This is their album Fire and Water, and the song that closes the album is the most famous song they did. It's the long version, as it says on the cover, of All Right Now, and for many years I only knew this version, the single version, which is highly edited. Now I know the band actually didn't like the edit very much. It takes out, I think, the guitar solo and so on, and they didn't really like this version of it. But I think the single version is fantastic. I think I think this is just too long. And Free were a band whose songs had lots of kind of quiet bits. Less is more, and certainly less is more on All Right Now. But on the single version of it, you've got just a brilliant little kind of pop rock tune, which is a tremendous version. The last one will send this band's fans into kind of rage, I would think. We're talking about Led Zeppelin. And the song from here is highly edited on the 45. Now, granted, Led Zeppelin were more of an album band than they were a single band, and this is an import single. It's part of an old Atlantic oldies series that I bought in the sort of 78 sort of period. And it's Whole Lot of Love. And for many years, I didn't realise that was an edited version. And when I heard the album version, I thought, I don't need that bit in the middle, that stupid weird bit, and Robert Plant sounding like he's having orgasms and stuff. I don't need that in my life. I think for me, this just is great. This is certainly good enough. And I know that will send Led Zepp fans mad, but that version is not as good as that version. So, tell me what you think in the comments below. Are there any other album versions of songs that you think are inferior to the single versions of songs? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'm sure I'll be back sometime soon with another video. Cheers.